The world as we knew it was gone. The city, once bustling with life, now lay in ruins. Shadows stretched long, and the air was thick with silence, a silence that hid the lurking danger. In the heart of the ruins, a small group of survivors huddled together. Their faces were etched with fear, but their eyes held a flicker of hope. Suddenly, a deafening roar shattered the silence. The ground trembled, and the survivors froze in terror. The beast was near. Among the survivors, a young woman named Leela stood up. Her hands trembled, but her voice was steady. "We can't keep running. It's time to fight." The group gathered whatever weapons they could find: rusted pipes, broken blades, and makeshift shields. Fear lingered, but courage began to take root. The beast emerged from the shadows, its massive form towering over the ruins. Its eyes glowed with a primal hunger, and its claws scraped against the broken pavement. The beast charged, its roar shaking the air. Lila raised her weapon, her heart pounding, but she stood her ground. The survivors fought with everything they had. Their weapons clashed against the beast's thick hide, but their determination burned brighter than their fear. Lila saw an opening. With a cry of defiance, she leapt onto the beast's back, driving her weapon into its flesh. The beast let out a final ear-splitting roar before retreating into the shadows. The survivors stood in stunned silence, their hearts still racing. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. The survivors knew more beasts lurked in the shadows, waiting for their next chance to strike. Lila sat by the fire, her hands still trembling. She had faced her fear, but she knew this was only the beginning. The survivors drew closer together, their bond strengthened by the battle. They knew they could only survive if they stood united. As night fell, the city grew darker and more dangerous. The survivors kept watch, their eyes scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. The sun rose over the ruins, casting a golden light over the city. The survivors prepared for another day, their spirits renewed by the light. The survivors set out into the city, their weapons at the ready. They knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready to face it together. As they ventured deeper into the city, a new threat emerged. The ground trembled, and the survivors knew another beast was near. The beast charged, its roar shaking the air. The survivors stood their ground, their weapons raised, and their hearts filled with determination. Lila stepped forward, her voice steady. "We fight together, or we fall together. Stay strong." The survivors fought with everything they had, and slowly the beast began to falter. With a final, desperate roar, it collapsed to the ground. The survivors stood in silence, their hearts racing. They had faced their fear and emerged victorious, but they knew the fight was far from over. The survivors found a safe place to rest, their bodies weary, but their spirits unbroken. They knew they had to keep going, no matter what. As they rested, the survivors discussed the city's secrets. They knew there were answers hidden in the ruins, and they were determined to find them. The survivors set out once more, their eyes fixed on the horizon. They knew the road ahead would be dangerous, but they were ready to face it together. As they ventured deeper into the city, they found a glimmer of hope, a sign that they were not alone in their fight. The survivors faced their greatest challenge yet, a massive beast that seemed unstoppable, but they knew they had to fight, for their survival and for the future. In the heat of battle, Lila made a daring move. She knew the risks, but she also knew it was the only way to save her friends. With a final, desperate roar, the beast collapsed to the ground. The survivors stood in stunned silence, their hearts still racing. The survivors knew the fight was far from over, but they also knew they had the strength to face whatever came next. Together, they would rebuild and reclaim their world. True bravery is not the absence of fear, but the determination to stand and fight despite it. And in the face of overwhelming danger, the survivors had found their courage.